school. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got into music, and maybe some influences in your life that have changed the way you make music or think about it?
Sure. So I started, I think like a lot of people, I started with piano lessons in elementary school, and then started band in fifth grade. I started on percussion actually, and then switched to horn, which is my primary instrument. And then played band and orchestra through high school, and I started composing in high school, and I had long kind of wanted to compose. I had my own musical ideas in my head, but I didn't really feel like I knew how to get them down on paper. And so I took a music theory class in high school that introduced really basics of harmony and key signatures and all those kinds of things, and gave me access to notation software and time to just kind of practice and do what I wanted. And so that was my jumping off point. So I did an undergrad degree at Vanderbilt University in composition and theory with a minor in horn, and then master's in composition at University of Colorado, Boulder. And now I'm here at Michigan State working on a DMA in composition and a master's in music theory.
Um, I also just want to say congrats to you and Kevin. I don't know if you want to talk about any of that, but it's just so joyful, and congrats are in order for both
Thank
of you.
you. Yeah, we're very excited to be having a baby in September. Yeah.
So I guess going on, could you describe the piece a little bit for us that you have been working on and just your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So the piece is called Captured, and it's about kind of feeling entrapped by social media and the internet and the interactions that we have online, especially during the pandemic when we have so few in-person interactions. It's something that's been on my mind as a lot of the people in my life I only know through the internet these days. And I think we tend to behave differently online than in person, and sometimes that can be very concerning. Um, and so I'd like to kind of highlight this frustration. And, I think it probably resonates with others too, but, and also acknowledge the very real world consequences when people meet on the internet, confer, spread false information, and then go and do things about it in real life.
And have you seen? I know it might be too soon to tell. In the last year, with all of this stuff being online, have you seen that influence your work in any way, or influence your process, um, or just maybe even future plans about how to write music and how to communicate with musicians and performers?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for the most part, a lot of what I do is the same as before. And I've been fortunate to have ongoing projects along the same lines as what I've always done, kind of carry me throughout the last year. So I haven't had any major shifts. But I do think it has given me a chance to be a little bit more experimental, try things out, um, and to have usually have a little bit more time built in with projects and just kind of that space to not always be running from one thing to the next, which has been kind of nice.
All right, I guess you want to talk a little bit about your process for composing. Do you usually audiate? Do you make voice memos? Do you usually have an instrument in front of you to get your ideas out? Or how do you foment your ideas?
Yeah, so I do most of my work at my computer, but I have a keyboard right next to me, and I have staff paper on hand. So for a number of pieces, I'll start sketching things on staff paper, or I'll start at the keyboard, or I'll start with my voice if, especially if it's something particularly lyrical. So that wasn't really the case with the piece I wrote for you guys, um, but that was more keyboard and Sibelius at that point. But I usually try to know what subject I want to write about first. When I started composing, I had a really hard time picking titles, and I think a lot of composers struggle with that. And so I kind of developed a routine where I have my subject matter and my title before I get notes on the page, so that I don't have that struggle after the fact. That's not always the case. Sometimes it changes over after I finish the piece, but I usually try to have a pretty solid idea of what I want to write about first, and then from there, and then I usually have some kind of um, idea of the trajectory of the piece, how long it's going to be, and what kind of musical high points I want to have, how long different sections will be. Sometimes I throw that all out as I'm working, but I try to have some kind of idea of what it's going to be like. And then one of the things that's really helpful is working with specific performers who made certain requests so that I have some boundaries and it's not just anything goes, but there's some limitations that's helpful too.
Now, thinking about your piece too, there's a really cool musical moment I like it when you go from the compound triple time or like the 6/8 to the 4/4. I like those kinds of musical devices. But I guess kind of like as a segue, what are some of your favorite kind of just musical things or even musical experiences? What kind of music inspires you?
Oh yeah, all kinds of different things. So if I give my like classical answer, there's Strauss is in there, Strauss and Mahler, and then down to Copland band composers like John Mackey, Victor Kelly, uh, who else? Maslanka. So there's kind of a mix of classical composers, but I'm also really into Taylor Swift's Folklore album, which I guess just won a Grammy, so I'm not the only person who feels that way. And then watching Hamilton this summer too was also really powerful. So I think I'm increasingly attracted to people who tell stories through music really well. And so those two things this summer or last summer were pretty big influences.
So that kind of leads into another question of like how you've been staying motivated artistically and maybe some like outside influences that have helped you do that or even things that you've learned along the way.
Yeah. So most of the time, I try to think about the word discipline instead of motivation, because I think motivation can come and go, and discipline kind of gets you, at the desk working, whether you feel like it or not. And so developing a routine where you're doing that is really helpful. That said, I know it's been a really hard time for people to maintain discipline and routine. Um, One of the things that helps me is really being grateful that I get to do music, and that I get to do what I love, and kind of thinking of the whole world of jobs. And I know lots of people enjoy doing other jobs, but I'm grateful that I get to do work that I really love, and that keeps me going. And then when I really feel stuck, in terms of like writer's block as a composer, it helps me to work with text a lot of the time. That feels like this outside influence that gets me going, or even just working within a really restricted palette. Like I only have these few resources. What could I possibly write with them? Um, and then part of it is just accepting that not everything you write every day is going to be your best, and allowing yourself to kind of put down notes that aren't the greatest, and you can always come back to it, revise, or ditch it once you get a little bit more creatively inspired.
You mentioned text being an influence for writer's block, and I have like it's kind of a two-part question. The first part would really be um, this idea of discipline versus motivation. I think that's also very powerful, and it can apply to any passion really. It doesn't have to be like composing; it could be performing, it could be visual art, it could be writing poetry. Um, I wonder if there were any um, like I just wonder about what the process was to get to that point. I know that it's a part of your practice now, but I'm wondering if there were lessons that you had to learn along the way that pushed you in that direction. Um, and then I'll ask the text question later.
Okay, lessons that push me in the direction of working towards discipline, you mean? Or that's a good question. I mean, I think I've always had composition teachers who say compose every day, like you have to do it every day, and I don't know that everyone does that, but I think I can even recall like my freshman year of college getting into a routine where I get up before my roommate and get breakfast and write music, and it was really peaceful and quiet. Like my whole floor in the dorm was really quiet, and just kind of enjoying those moments and finding finding the joy in the piece and having some sense of routine and stability. I think we can thrive well on routine, um, and so that's been helpful. Um, yeah, I think having a well blocked out schedule has been something that has allowed me to have a steady pace of work instead of kind of staying up till 3 a.m. one night working for 4 hours and then not writing for a week. I don't think I could function very well like that.
That also makes me think, would you, if you didn't have such a regimented schedule from school and work and other things, do you think that that would be different for you in terms of being able to get up every day and write? Or do you still think you would subscribe to that?
I think it would be harder in certain ways because I think when you feel like you have this overabundance of free time, the time kind of shrinks down and you're like, oh, where'd the day go? Um, I mean that's a great question because I'm coming up on a time when I'll be done with coursework in 6 weeks or so, and then I'll just be dissertating after that, and kind of I'm gonna have to make those decisions a lot more in terms of how I use my time. So I'm hoping that I will maintain, take the lessons I've learned from coursework and all that regularity and translate it to the time I'm working on my dissertation.
And sorry, that was kind of like a long two part
Yeah.
two part question. But the other thing that you said that really piqued my interest was using text to help you get out of writer's block in some way. And I'm wondering, are there any texts that you find yourself coming back to frequently for that? Maybe finding comfort in a repeat text, or um, just even what are some of these texts, or what are things like texts that influence you?
Yeah, it changes all the time. I've never tried to set the same text twice. But I do think that over the years, my enjoyment of poetry has grown a lot. So there have been a few times when I'm writing a vocal piece and I have no idea where I'm going to get the text, and I like went to the library and checked out just books and books of poems, and like just cruising through them was really fun and really enjoying. So yeah, I think kind of just going through anything really, honestly. Sometimes I'm looking for public domain text. Sometimes I worked with living poets. Occasionally I've written my own texts, but all kinds of texts.
Um, I had a really good question to follow up with that, and now my brain is blanking on it. And it was about text. It'll come back. Um, but on this, oh, I remember. It was about process and this discipline thing. Um, oh, and now it's gone again. Okay, I'm gonna ask the other question. Sorry. Um, has is this? Well, I guess actually, I'm gonna let someone else answer a question because my brain is.
I got a question. So you mentioned how your composition professors always taught you this idea of composing every day. Going along that idea of just things you've been taught, what maybe musical or non-musical things do you wish you may have learned more throughout your educational career that you may hopefully pass on to future students of yours or
Yeah,
students now?
great question. I think music schools are getting better at addressing a lot of these kind of auxiliary issues, but I think issues around like recording technology and music technology more broadly. Um, this is my third degree in composition, and I don't think any of my degree programs have had a required music technology course. I've taken music technology, electronic music courses, but of my own choosing, not because there was ever a degree requirement. So I know that's not the case with every program, but I'm kind of wondering kind of how in the 21st century I got through a DMA in composition without that being a requirement. And not just as a composer thing, but as like everyone needs to know how to set up a microphone and a camera and things like that. That a lot of us have had to learn more about in the last year, but really should have been taught all along. So that's one side of it, and then the other side I would say is um, learning more about pop styles and playing pop styles in a classical program or just any non-classical style. I don't expect music school to be able to teach me every genre and make me proficient in everything. But I think it's kind of inevitable that all of us are going to have gigs or situations where we want to be able to read a lead sheet or we want to be able to improvise a little bit in a pop style. And it would be great to have a little bit more of that, I think, in my professional training.
And do you see yourself incorporating these things? Because you teach composition to students and stuff, sure. Do you see yourself incorporating some of these things into their um, education?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking ahead, like especially if I get an academic job. I certainly hope that these are things that are part of the curriculum and things I can do in lessons. I think there's a broad becoming over time. There's been a broader acceptance of students bringing to lessons whatever they want to bring. I see that at MSU, but I also know that there are things that students say I can't bring this to a lesson. It's the wrong genre, it's too personal, or whatever the reason is. And it would be nice for that communication to be open even more than what it currently is. You can't expect your teacher to be trained in everything and that they can help you in absolutely every area. But I think we can have a little bit more openness in terms of what comes into a composition lesson.
I have since remembered the other
Great.
question, and it's about kind of about motivation and process. Still back in the oh, sorry, the other word. How do you consider other things that aren't musical? Like, could you wake up in the morning and instead of writing music, could you like go find text and that be consider that part of your discipline and your writing, or part of the process in some kind of way?
Yeah, absolutely. It sort of depends on what stage I'm in with a piece, but I think there's a lot of pre-composition work um, in terms of finding a text, finding the subject matter, listening to other music, or post-composition activity, making scoring parts, trying to get nice MIDI recording, communicating with performers. I think all of that, kind of the feeling I can look back at the end of the day or after a few hours, whatever it is, and say, I made some progress on that piece. I'm a little bit closer to a finished product. Whatever that activity looks like, it doesn't have to just be notes on a page.
I guess kind of going off of that, like what are some non-musical activities that kind of influence your musical activity? Is that a good way to word it?
Yeah. So I like to read a lot, and I think more and more I'm accepting that reading has an influence on the music that I write. Both fiction and nonfiction. I like historical fiction a lot. And I increasingly have also kind of, looking back, acknowledged the fact that a lot of the traveling I've done has turned up in my music. And kind of now, even in the last year, getting to a place where I can say, hey, yeah, that's a really important thing for me. So I've written about places I've been. When I lived in Colorado, we did a lot of traveling around the West and got to visit tons of national parks and some really cool sites. And it's just breathtaking, a lot of it. And even traveling from Michigan, around Michigan, we did a big road trip through the South and Appalachia. There's so much to be inspired, I think, in those sites. So that's increasingly, a big part of the influences that I have. And then, current events, whatever's on my mind, things I'm contemplating, I'll make appearances in my music.
That you mentioning travel brings another great segue. I guess describe some of your favorite places that you've traveled to, and then maybe another two-part question. Tell us about some of the places you really dream about visiting someday.
Sure. So, gosh, within the U.S., I've loved so many of the national parks out west: Glacier, Rocky Mountain, Yellowstone, Yosemite, Grand Canyon, Black Canyon of the Gunnison, even a really kind of probably not well known, but Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota. There's just hidden gems of land features and rock formations all over the place. So those are some of my favorites. And I really enjoyed Seattle when we went out west. We visited Seattle, San Francisco, Vegas. Those are all pretty cool too. I've been to Europe a few times, mostly the UK, Italy, and France. I would love to go to Switzerland or Germany, I think. I took a train through Switzerland to get to the airport, and it was just beautiful. So I'd love to go back because we were only there for a day. I'd love to go to Greece, and then I think New Zealand or Iceland would be pretty cool too.
Were there any experiences you had at any of those places, or maybe one that sticks out in particular, um, other than just the scenery and like landscapes that have influenced your music making?
That's a good question. I need to think for a second. I think even though these are kind of rural, well, they're not like urban areas and they're tourist areas, so you meet people from all over. I think you still get a little bit of local culture. You can at times. So I remember we were driving through northern Idaho and trying to find this a forest or a trail that didn't really exist. I think. Well, the forest existed. I don't think there was a trail that we could have gone hiking in, but we like got to this kind of dead end and met some local guys, and like off in the distance I could hear people shooting guns. And I was like, this is a little nerve-wracking for me, but this is part of, like, there's no one around. They hunt. That's what they do. They do target practice. That's kind of the culture there. And then even kind of being in, this is a little Colorado snobbery after living there for 3 years, but going hiking in Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee, when the elevation gets to like, I don't know, 2,000 feet, and everyone's like, oh, it's so high, we're out of breath, and we're like, no, you're not, you're fine. So I think you get some local culture and flavor, and you even interacting with tourists, international tourists, or just people from all over the U.S. Can be kind of cool. I miss those experiences. Even if we got to go to a national park this year, we'd be trying to keep our distance from other people, so that would be a little harder.
Um, on the topic of favorites, um, do you, do you have any favorite musical experiences that have shaped you, either just growing up or in the last year? Um, yeah, that are
Yeah,
just impactful to you.
certainly. I can think of like so many things with a question like that. Down to like my first marching band experience, we played the Firebird, and I had never heard of Stravinsky, and that was really cool. In high school, I was a pianist in the jazz band, and I was so used to our normal band concerts. In the auditorium, everyone sits there and claps, and we did these jazz band concerts where people came and ate food and could, they didn't really chat, but like it was so much more casual, and we just go one song into the next, and just feeling like, oh, there's different ways we can have concerts and different ways we can perform, and it can be more casual or more formal. I think those were formative experiences. And then there's just pieces that I loved to play the times I got them. So some of the band pieces like Blue Shades and Lincolnshire Posy um, were pretty big, and then in orchestra playing Concerto for Orchestra by Bartok or La Mer by Debussy. Those are some really cool experiences, and I loved the thrill, especially with something like Concerto for Orchestra, which is longer. The thrill of like conductor holds up the baton and is like, all right, let's go, and then 45 minutes later you're finally done, but it's such a ride with this group of people on stage, and I think that can be really thrilling.
We've talked a lot about writing before this, but you play a lot. Are there any things that you've played in the last year that you've really enjoyed or looking forward to performing more in the future?
I don't play that much anymore. I think I'm a lot. It's okay. I'm thinking a lot about experiences I had through college. Um, I think, but the flip side of that is I get to play things for fun more. So I've recorded parts like my husband's high school band did, a recording where everyone submitted their own part, and I got to fill in the horn part since they didn't have any horn players, or accompanying him on tuba. We just kind of breeze through duets on piano and tuba and have fun that way. So yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of work to keep up horn chops. And I'm not as good at sight reading on piano as I would be at horn, so I can't do quite as much there. But there's a lot of just like playing for fun, which is great too.
It's like a really interesting point, and I don't even know if I can like word this into a question, but like you brought up like playing for fun and how like you feel like empowered to do that now, but like maybe back when you were playing a lot for school, and I think we can all relate. It's as much as we want to have fun making music, we're like mostly playing for like improvement and for um, obligations. Like we all have things coming up, and so like anytime you put the horn on your face, um, you have to get something done. Whereas like now it's for pure enjoyment. Do you feel like that has I don't know how to say, like taken a weight off your shoulders in your relationship with your instrument?
Yeah, I think it has in a way. I think it helps that I never wanted to be a performer professionally. I was never shooting for that because I can imagine that adds a whole nother layer of stress when you want like this is going to make or break you. Especially when it's so tiny on horn, like it feels like everything rides on what happens in this little space. Um, but I think I can enjoy even though I'm not at my peak horn playing. When I do play, I can enjoy my sound a little bit more because I'm not always constantly thinking about how I'm breathing and how my intonation is and how my tone is, and just kind of being like, this is a great instrument. It's a really nice instrument to listen to, and I can kind of enjoy it in that way. Um, and I'm not like in a studio where I know studios can be really cordial and collegial, and that was my experience. But I think that it's really easy to compare yourself to someone else has a better sound or a better high range or a better double tongue, and it's kind of when you're on your own a little bit more. It can also be a little freeing to not be thinking about what your weakness is compared to your peers.
All right, let's just rough segue. Just tell us about some of your favorite TV shows and podcasts or movies, YouTube channels, anything you've been consuming media wise lately.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who is rewatching the same shows. So I love The Office. I think that's my all-time favorite. I'm rewatching. I've seen The Office at least 3 times through, and now I just watch episodes intermittently. I'm rewatching Parks and Rec for the second time. Just finished Brooklyn Nine-Nine for the first time, and I've learned that all of those shows are by the same creators and writers. So I think that's probably not a coincidence. Um, I don't watch very many movies recently. In terms of um, YouTube channels, honestly, a lot of things related to pregnancy right now, so I won't go down that rabbit hole too much. Um, and um, Podcasts, a couple related to The Office, a couple like faith related podcasts, and then just trying to read not related to school is nice.
Who's your favorite character from The Office?
Oh gosh. Well, my default reaction would be to say like Pam. I think I think we'll go with that.
Mine is Kevin, just because of the beans.
The chili.
The chili, yeah, that's what
But
I
yeah,
meant. The
yeah,
spilling the chili.
that is
I think
such
he's
a large
endearing
moment.
either way.
Yeah.
Um, this is also not really music related. What are some things that you're looking forward to starting your little family?
Um. Goodness. Well, I've mainly having a baby. I have this box of children's books that my dad gave me when we moved to Michigan, that from my childhood and from his childhood. And I was going through them recently, and just all these, fun memories coming back. And so there's part of me that's just like, I'm excited to read children's books again. And I know that, sometimes when you have a toddler, you're reading the same book 10 times in a row, and that's not super fun, but I'm looking forward to just kind of like discovering life again with a little person who doesn't know anything yet.
That was such a like succinct and beautiful way to say that. Uh, and like I don't know, the learning with them and growing with them is just it just is so nice.
Yeah, definitely. And another big piece of it is like, just making my parents grandparents, and kind of introducing new baby to the extended family and stuff. I'm looking forward to.
And Tucker.
Yeah, I think Tucker will do great. Tucker's our dog, and he's very gentle. He's fine with kids. He doesn't ever get vicious. But one thing I think we'll have a challenge with is that he thinks stuffed animals are his toys. And you probably don't want a dog chewing your favorite stuffed animal, but I sort of learned we have some old stuffed animals I put out, and I'm like, not yours. And he, like, if I kind of like encourage him to back away, he won't try to take them and put them in his mouth. So I'm hoping that we can do some training where those are baby toys, here's dog toys.
Do you think you'll try and encourage music in their life, or do you think you'll kind of let that happen naturally, or what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think it would be possible to not encourage music in our household. We have, Keaton knows, we have a gazillion instruments in our basement. My husband is always buying and selling and playing instruments, fixing them, teaching. He teaches private lessons on everything right now because he's teaching all of his band students privately. And we have a piano, and like, I don't think our kid has a fair chance of escaping music. But that said, I will not, if it's not what they want to do, I'm not going to force it on them.
Also in line with future projects, even if they're not familiar. You had mentioned dissertating, and um, I'm wondering what that's going to be about. And also, if you have any other future projects that you're working on now or going to start soon that you're excited about and would want to talk about.
Sure. I don't think I'm ready to talk about my dissertation publicly yet. It's kind of in the initial stages. But I can share, but that will be coming very soon. So up right now, I'm working on a project for video and fixed media, which is totally out of my wheelhouse. So that's been kind of cool, one of those pandemic challenges. I'll be writing a piano trio for a festival after that. So I'm looking forward to that. I haven't written a piano trio since high school, I think. And I have a few online premieres coming up. One is with Hub New Music on April 5th, playing a quartet for violin, cello, clarinet, and flute, and piece with Grand Valley State University New Music Ensemble, which will also be premiered online this spring. So I'm looking forward to those a lot.
What are these pieces? What do you want to give us, like names and maybe a little program note or something maybe?
Sure. So the piece for Grand Valley's State University Music Ensemble I wrote last year, almost a year ago, and it was supposed to be a fall thing that got pushed back. And it's there are 5 composers commissioned for this, all to write a piece about Lake Michigan, which is great because I like writing about places, I guess, and nature. So that piece is called Fresh, and it's reflection on some of my personal experiences at the lake and just like the freshwater aspect of it and the beautiful blue of it compared in contrast to the saltiness of the ocean and kind of that environment. And then the piece for Hub New Music is called Still in the Middle, and that piece is a reflection on resting between and the tension between 2 opposing forces instead of trying to be pulled one way or the other, just different circumstances that can happen.
Can't wait to hear them. That's going to be awesome. Um, and then one of our more last questions, do you have any collaborators that you've been working with or friends or like Tucker or anyone that you would want to give like a shout out to?
Yeah. Well, I should also mention, since you said collaborators, I wrote a piece for James Frankman, our flutist here at MSU, who he created some paintings. Then he asked me to write miniatures based on the paintings, and he's gonna premiere those. So that kind of collaboration is super fun. I like the extra visual, side of it, and the back and forth. He hands me something, I hand him something. He, gives me something back. Um, yeah, and I should also, I guess, I'm grateful to this composition studio at MSU for, giving us, maintaining great teaching and good opportunities as much as possible during the pandemic. Um, you know, as far, even though lessons are online and we're not seeing each other, I feel like I've still been able to grow and learn this year, and I think that's kind of the stability that the campus has provided and the department has provided.
Great. Yeah, I have to agree with that as well. I'm not sure, even though it's been interesting to learn how to do this online thing, just having that little bit of contact with other studio members and people has made it a little bit more bearable. We really appreciate you taking your time to talk with us, and we've learned a lot about you, even though we already know you, and hopefully everyone else gets to learn some stuff too. We're excited to play your piece. Um, so thank you for also taking the time to write music for us. We really appreciate it. Um, and
Yeah.
we
Thank
can't
you.
wait to perform it.
Yeah. This has been a really fun collaboration. So I'm excited. I'm excited to hear the end result.
Thank you so much.